I knew the moment I opened the door that my life had just divided into before and after. The storm had been raging for hours, rain slamming against my windshield so hard it felt personal, like the sky had chosen my little sedan as its enemy. It was a little past midnight, my shift at St. Mary's ER finally over, scrubs wrinkled, coffee long gone cold in the cup holder. The back roads outside Portland were nearly empty, just slick asphalt reflecting headlights in long trembling streaks. I should have kept driving. Any rational person would have. But when my headlights caught the shape of a man stumbling out of the tree line and collapsing onto the shoulder, instinct overruled common sense. I pulled over before I could talk myself out of it. The wind nearly tore the door from my hand when I stepped out, rain soaking through my jacket in seconds. He was on his side, breathing but barely, dark hair plastered to his forehead, white dress shirt stained deep crimson at the ribs. Not a scrape. Not a simple accident. I knelt anyway. Hey, I shouted over the storm, pressing 2 fingers to his neck. A pulse, stronger than I expected. His hand shot out suddenly and wrapped around my wrist. Even weak, even half-conscious, his grip was controlled. Deliberate. His eyes opened, and for a split second the world felt smaller. Not confused. Not afraid. Calculating. Don't call the police, he said, voice rough but steady. Not a plea. A command. Every warning bell in my body went off at once. Normal men didn't say that. Normal men didn't look at you like they were memorizing your face for later. I should have stepped back. Instead, I swallowed and said, "You're bleeding." He studied me like that was the most interesting thing I could have said. Thunder cracked overhead, close enough to rattle my bones. His grip loosened just slightly, just enough for me to make a choice. I chose wrong. Or maybe I chose fate. Getting him into my car was harder than I expected. He was at least 6'2", solid muscle beneath soaked fabric, dead weight, but not fragile. He didn't groan, didn't complain, just watched me through half-lidded eyes as if he were the one assessing whether I was worth trusting. My apartment was 8 minutes away. The longest 8 minutes of my life. He never passed out completely, never stopped watching. When we reached my place, I guided him inside, ignoring the voice in my head that kept whispering, "You don't know who he is." I laid him on my couch, turned on every light, grabbed my medical kit from the hallway closet. The wound was clean. Too clean. A precise entry, no exit. Whoever had done this hadn't wanted chaos. They had wanted certainty. "Stay with me," I said quietly as I cut away the ruined shirt. His gaze flicked to the framed nursing degree on my wall, then back to me. "Emily Carter." He read from the name badge still clipped to my scrubs. Even injured, he noticed everything. I pressed gauze against the wound, working quickly, methodically. Outside, the storm howled. Inside, the air felt charged, heavy with something I couldn't name. "You shouldn't have stopped," he murmured. I met his eyes, steady despite the way my pulse pounded in my ears. "You shouldn't have been left in the rain." A corner of his mouth lifted, not quite a smile. Something colder. Something knowing. And in that moment, with thunder shaking the windows and his blood staining my hands, I had no idea I had just invited one of the most feared men in the city into my home. Or that by sunrise, the men who wanted him gone would know exactly where to find me. By 3 a.m, the storm had not slowed, but the bleeding had. I finished suturing the wound with steady hands, the rhythm of it grounding me the way it always did in the emergency room. Thread, pull, tie, repeat. Adrian Moretti never cried out. Not when I cleaned the injury. Not when I pressed to stop the blood. He simply watched me as if I were solving a puzzle instead of stitching his side back together. When I finally leaned back, exhaling for what felt like the first time in an hour, his gaze had not softened. It had sharpened. "You are not afraid of me," he said quietly. It was not a question. I dropped the used gauze into the trash and reached for fresh bandages. "You are a patient," I replied. "That is all you are right now." A faint sound left him, almost a laugh, but without warmth. "That is not how most people see me." I wrapped the bandage firmly around his torso, careful, professional, ignoring the way his muscles tensed under my touch. Most people are not standing in their own living room at 3 a.m. trying to keep you alive. The words slipped out before I could soften them. His eyes flicked around the apartment then, cataloging everything. The small gray couch. The chipped coffee table. The framed photo of my sister and me at Cannon Beach. The single bookshelf filled with nursing textbooks and paperbacks. He noticed details the way trauma surgeons notice subtle symptoms. Nothing escaped him. You live alone, he observed. Yes. That is unwise. I straightened slowly. Breaking into my medical history was already intrusive. Let us not analyze my living situation. His jaw shifted slightly, not offended, not amused. Measuring. Outside, thunder rolled again, closer now, rattling the window panes. For a moment the power flickered, lights dimming before stabilizing. In that brief darkness, his voice lowered. Did anyone see you stop? My stomach tightened. I had not thought that far ahead. I shook my head. It was empty. He studied me for a long second, then nodded once, as if filing the answer away. Good. The way he said it made the air feel thinner. I moved to the sink, washing my hands, watching pink swirl down the drain. When I turned back, he was already trying to sit up. Do not, I said sharply, crossing the room in 2 strides. If you tear the stitches, I am not doing this again. His hand stilled on the edge of the couch. For a heartbeat, something unfamiliar passed through his expression. Respect, or perhaps surprise that I had spoken to him that way. You give orders easily, he said. I give medical instructions, I corrected. There is a difference. He leaned back slowly, conceding the point. The silence that followed felt charged, like the moment before lightning strikes. Then his phone vibrated against the hardwood floor where it had fallen from his pocket earlier. The screen lit up with a name that made his entire expression shift from controlled to absolute ice. He did not answer. The phone buzzed again. And again. I looked at him, and for the first time, I saw it clearly. This was not a random man caught in a bad situation. This was someone at the center of something vast and dangerous. Who are you? I asked quietly. His eyes met mine, steady and unblinking. Someone you should not have brought home, Emily. The way he said my name was not threatening. It was certain, as if whatever had started on that rain-soaked road was already moving forward, unstoppable, and I was standing directly in its path. The headlights did not move away immediately. They lingered, washing pale light across my ceiling like a silent question. My heart was beating so loudly, I was certain whoever sat in that car could hear it through the walls. I took a step back from the window, every instinct telling me to turn off the lights, to disappear. Adrian did not look toward the window again. He looked at me, calm, focused, as if my reaction mattered more than the vehicle outside. Listen to me carefully, he said, his voice low but steady. If someone knocks, you do not open the door. You do not speak. You let me handle it. A sharp breath left me before I could stop it. Handle it how? You can barely stand. His expression did not change. I can stand long enough. The certainty in his tone unsettled me more than the headlights. I crossed the room in 2 strides and switched off the lamp near the window. The apartment fell into softer shadows, lit only by the kitchen light behind us. Outside, the engine idled. Then, slowly, the headlights shifted away. The vehicle rolled forward, tires hissing over wet pavement, and disappeared past the corner. I stayed frozen for a full 5 seconds after the sound faded. They were not here for a social visit, I whispered. Adrian leaned back against the couch, conserving energy, but his eyes remained alert. No, he agreed. The storm outside began to weaken, rain softening from violent sheets to steady tapping against the glass. The quiet that followed felt heavier than the thunder had. I turned toward him, anger and fear tangling in my chest. You said you would not put me at risk. I said I would not allow you to remain at risk, he corrected calmly. The distinction again. Always precise. That is not comforting, I replied. He studied me for a moment, then reached slowly for his phone again. This time, he made a call. He placed it on speaker without asking me. A man answered on the second ring. His voice was controlled, cautious. Adrian. Just his first name. Nothing else. Status, Adrian said. No greeting. No explanation. We located the vehicle that followed you from the docks, the man replied. They are searching the north side. Adrian's gaze flicked toward me briefly before returning to nothing in particular, as if he could see through the walls. Pull them back, he said. Now. There was a brief pause on the other end. Are you secure? The man asked. Adrian's eyes held mine as he answered. Yes. He ended the call before anything else could be said. The word echoed in my mind. Secure. I did not feel secure. I felt exposed. You told them to leave? I said slowly. Yes. Why? His answer came without hesitation. Because if they continue searching, the attention stays here. A chill slid down my spine. He had chosen to reduce the threat, not escalate it. Not because he was weak. Because he was calculating. Because he had decided something. What happens now? I asked. He shifted slightly, wincing only once before masking it. Now, he said quietly, they will assume I am somewhere else. His gaze sharpened. And by morning, anyone who followed me tonight will regret that mistake. I swallowed, holding his stare. I did not sign up for this. For the first time, something almost human softened his expression. You did not, he agreed. But you chose me anyway. And in the silence that followed, I realized the storm outside had never been the real danger. It had only been the warning. By the time the rain slowed to a whisper against the windows, it was almost 5 in the morning. The sky outside had shifted from black to a dull charcoal gray, the kind that made the city look suspended between night and day. I had not slept. Adrian had not closed his eyes once. He sat upright now, back against my couch, one arm resting carefully at his side, posture controlled despite the injury. Too controlled, as if pain were a language he refused to speak. I moved around the apartment quietly, wiping down the coffee table, gathering medical supplies, trying to reclaim the space as mine. It no longer felt like mine. It felt occupied. You should rest, I said without looking at him. Your body needs it. My body will do what it is told, he replied evenly. I glanced at him then. That is not how bodies work. A faint shadow of amusement crossed his face, but it disappeared almost instantly. His phone lit up again, not with a call this time, but with a message. He read it, then typed a short response. The movements were efficient, restrained. Are they gone? I asked. Yes, he said. For now. The words settled heavily in the room. For now. I leaned against the kitchen counter, arms folded. You cannot stay here after sunrise, I said. My neighbors wake up early. Mrs. Hahn walks her dog at 6:30 every morning. She notices everything. Adrian nodded once, as if committing the detail to memory. Then I will leave before 6. The certainty in his voice surprised me. You can barely stand. He shifted forward slowly, placing both feet on the floor. With deliberate control, he rose. Not easily, not without effort. But he stood, tall, steady. The bandage held. I stand well enough, he said quietly. The statement was not arrogance. It was fact. I stepped closer instinctively, ready to steady him if he faltered. He did not. Instead, he looked down at me, and for a moment the intensity in his eyes was no longer cold. It was something else. Assessing. Protective. You will go to work today, he said. You will follow your routine exactly. I blinked. You do not get to dictate my schedule. If you change your routine, it signals fear, he replied calmly. Fear attracts attention. I opened my mouth to argue, then stopped. He was not speaking emotionally. He was speaking strategically. That unsettled me more than anger would have. And what about you? I asked. What is your routine? His gaze held mine for a long second. I remove problems. The simplicity of it sent a chill through me, not because he sounded cruel, but because he sounded certain. Outside, the first hint of dawn stretched pale light across the horizon. My clock read 5:22. Tom was moving whether I wanted it to or not. Adrian reached for his jacket, now dry enough to wear, and slipped it on carefully. He paused near the door, hand hovering just above the knob. Emily, he said, my name quieter now, less commanding. You saved my life tonight. I swallowed. I treated a wound. He shook his head slightly. No, you chose. His eyes softened in a way that felt far more dangerous than any threat. And I do not forget choices like that. Before I could respond, he opened the door and stepped into the gray morning light, leaving behind the faint scent of rain and something heavier, something that felt less like gratitude and more like a promise. I told myself it would feel different in daylight, that whatever had stepped into my apartment before dawn would shrink back into something explainable once the sun came up. It did not. By 8 in the morning, I was walking through the sliding doors of St. Mary's Medical Center with the same routine I had followed for years, but everything felt slightly off, like the world had shifted half an inch to the left. The fluorescent lights were too bright. The smell of antiseptic too sharp. I tied my hair back, clipped my badge to my scrubs, and forced my breathing into a steady rhythm. Routine. That was what he had said. Follow your routine. Fear attracts attention. I hated that his logic made sense. The morning passed in a blur of patience and chart updates. A sprained ankle. A child with a high fever. An elderly man complaining of chest tightness that turned out to be anxiety. Ordinary problems. Solvable problems. I clung to them. Around 11:30, I stepped outside for air. The rain had washed the city clean, the pavement still damp, the sky a pale winter blue. That was when I noticed the black sedan parked across the street. It was not flashy, not new enough to draw admiration. Just present. Engine off. Windows tinted. It had not been there when my shift started. I told myself I was imagining things. Portland was full of black sedans. People parked near hospitals all the time. Still, a slow awareness crawled up my spine. I pretended to check my phone while studying the reflection in the glass doors. The car did not move. The driver did not step out. It simply existed. Watching. My pulse picked up, but I did not change direction. I walked back inside, shoulders straight, pace even. Routine. If this was connected to him, then reacting would confirm something. If it was not, I would only embarrass myself. At 1:15, my phone vibrated in the pocket of my scrubs. Unknown number. I stared at it for a full 3 seconds before answering. Emily Carter, I said evenly. A familiar voice responded, calm and unhurried. You are following instructions. I stepped into an empty supply room and shut the door quietly. You have someone outside my work, I said, keeping my tone level. You said you would not put me at risk. He is not there to threaten you, Adrian replied. He is there to observe. That is not comforting, I whispered. It is not meant to be, he said. There was a brief pause, then his voice lowered slightly. There were additional movements this morning. I prefer certainty. I leaned against the metal shelving, heart pounding despite my effort to remain composed. You do not get to assign me protection without asking. You are correct, he said calmly. I do not ask. The honesty of it hit harder than any argument would have. This is my life, I said, not a territory you manage. Silence lingered on the line for a moment, and when he spoke again, his tone had shifted. Not softer, just more deliberate. Emily, someone followed me last night. That means someone is willing to search. Until I remove that variable, you are part of the equation. I closed my eyes briefly, absorbing the weight of his world pressing against mine. I did not choose this, I said quietly. You chose to stop your car, he replied. Not accusing, not mocking, just reminding. My grip tightened on the phone. Then hear me clearly, I said, my voice steady despite the fear under it. I am not something you control. There was a pause long enough for me to hear my own breathing. Then, almost quietly, he answered, I know. And for the first time since the storm, I was not sure whether that made things better or far more dangerous. I finished my shift at 6 in the evening with the distinct feeling that I was no longer walking alone, even when the hallway behind me was empty. The black sedan had remained across the street all day. It had not followed me aggressively. It had not approached. It had simply existed, steady and patient, like a shadow that did not belong to me. When I stepped outside, the air was cold and crisp, the storm from the night before nothing more than damp pavement and scattered leaves. The sedan's engine turned on. The moment I reached the sidewalk. Not loud, not dramatic, just present. I did not look directly at it. I walked to my car, unlocked it, and drove home exactly the way I always did. 2 right turns. 1 stop at the 4-way intersection on Burnside. No sudden moves. No speeding. Routine. In my rearview mirror, headlights appeared 3 cars back. Not tailgating. Not obvious. But consistent. My pulse stayed steady, though my fingers tightened slightly on the steering wheel. I hated that I was adapting. Hated that part of me had already accepted this as normal. When I pulled into my apartment complex, the headlights continued past the entrance without slowing. I exhaled slowly. Protection or surveillance. I still had not decided which word I preferred. Upstairs, my apartment felt too quiet. I locked the door, checked the windows, and stood still for a moment, listening. Nothing. No engines idling. No footsteps outside. Just the hum of my refrigerator and the faint ticking of the wall clock. I set my bag down and leaned against the door, closing my eyes briefly. This was not my world. I dealt with broken bones and fevers. With fear that could be measured in heart rates and blood pressure. Adrian's world moved in silence and shadows. At 7:23, my phone vibrated again. This time his name appeared on the screen. I hesitated only a second before answering. You are home, he said. Not a question. Yes. Was there any deviation from your normal schedule? No, a brief pause. Good. I walked toward the kitchen, lowering my voice instinctively even though I was alone. The car followed me. Yes. The simple confirmation made my chest tighten. You said it was for observation. It is, he replied calmly. But observation works both ways. I frowned slightly. What does that mean? There was a faint shift in his breathing, as if he were moving carefully. It means anyone watching you now believes you are important. The words settled heavily between us. Important to who? I asked quietly. Another pause. Longer this time. To me, he said. The honesty in his tone unsettled me more than any threat could have. Adrian. I began, struggling to keep my voice steady. This is not protection. This is escalation. It is prevention, he corrected. There is a difference. I moved toward the window despite myself, pulling the curtain aside just enough to glance at the parking lot. Empty. Calm. Ordinary. I do not want to be a message, I said. You are not a message, he replied. You are a responsibility. I turned away from the window, heart pounding harder now, not from fear, but from something more complicated. I never agreed to that. His response came softer than I expected. I know. And in the silence that followed, I understood something I had been trying to ignore all day. The car outside was not the real shift. The real shift was that somewhere between the storm and this quiet evening, the most dangerous man I had ever met had decided that my safety was now his. The line went quiet after his promise, but it did not feel empty. It felt deliberate, like something had just shifted into place. I stood there in my kitchen, the new phone warm in my hand, my old life sitting inches away on the counter. Protection is not the same as permission, I said finally, my voice calm even though my pulse was not. On the other end, Adrian did not interrupt. He waited. That alone told me more than any declaration could have. You said I get to choose, I continued. So here is my choice. No more silent decisions about my life. No more cars without telling me. No more men outside my door unless I know why. The silence stretched for a second, 2 seconds, 3. Then he exhaled slowly. You negotiate with me, he observed. I set boundaries, I corrected. There was the faintest shift in his tone, something almost reflective. Most people ask me for protection, he said. You are the first to put conditions on it. I leaned against the counter, staring at the city lights outside my window. That is because I am not afraid of you, I replied. The truth of it surprised me as much as it seemed to surprise him. I was afraid of his world, afraid of the unknown, but not of him, not in the way he expected. You should be, he said quietly. Why? I asked. Because I am not a safe man. His honesty did not come with drama. It came with certainty. I closed my eyes briefly. You were safe with me, I said. On my couch, bleeding. You did not threaten me. You did not force anything. You asked me what I wanted tonight. There was a pause long enough that I wondered if the call had dropped. Then his voice returned, lower than before. And what do you want, Emily? The question settled into my chest, heavy and undeniable. I looked around my apartment, at the ordinary walls, the chipped coffee table, the quiet life I had built piece by piece. I thought about the storm, the headlights, the way he had stood at my door before dawn and called my choice something he would never forget. I want honesty, I said. If your world touches mine, I want to see it coming. I want the truth, not protection wrapped in silence. Another measured breath on the other end. Then you will have the truth, he said. Not a promise made lightly. A statement of intent. Outside, a car drove past, ordinary and unremarkable. No lingering headlights. No idling engine. Just the city moving forward. And in return, he asked quietly. I did not hesitate. In return, I decide how close I stand to that world. The words hung between us, balanced and steady. For the first time since the storm, the power did not feel one-sided. It felt chosen. He did not argue. He did not command. He simply said, very well. The call ended without theatrics. No goodbye, no warning, just quiet. I set the new phone down beside the old one and stood there for a long moment, listening to the steady rhythm of my own breathing. I had not stepped into his world. Not completely, but I had not walked away either. And somewhere beyond the reach of my small apartment, a man who controlled an empire had just agreed to my terms. Sometimes power is not about who rules the city. Sometimes it is about who dares to stand still when the storm arrives and says, I choose.